take me through some of the club affiliations and, more importantly, the coaching relationships that you might have been creating as you go from a 25-yard race where you were just throwing your hat in to like getting into the sport. Take me through kind of who are your influences at that time.
Yeah, so I think I was 8 years old when I first started swimming for Ann Arbor Swim Club, and Dan Ohm was my coach at the time. And so I'd go to the local elementary school or middle school and go to practice a couple times a week. And he was an awesome first coach to have, just because he made it so much fun. Never really took it too seriously in terms of like how fast you were swimming, but it was really just all about learning technique and developing a relationship with my teammates. And so that was a great introduction to the sport, not, too intense or anything from the beginning, but really just getting comfortable with swimming the right way and developing a love for kind of the camaraderie that you build with teammates. And then I think a year or two after that, we merged with Club Wolverine. And so it was all just one big Ann Arbor team. And so I started training with Josh and Z Morgan. And they were kind of my club coaches all the way through high school as well. Have great relationship with them, kind of the same thing at that early age too, just really focusing on, doing things right and making swimming fun, really emphasizing the importance of teammates. And that's really kind of what kept me in the sport throughout those years. And slowly as I got older into 11, 12 age group, starting to get into those longer events, swimming became a little bit more intense, instead of just kind of focusing on technique during the practices. They, really kind of instilled that work ethic that all swimmers have in us. Just get up and grind. And I mean, that's, an invaluable skill that all swimmers have. And so I credit them a lot for kind of, I don't know, I guess instilling that in me. And, but yeah, I mean, so lucky to have such great coaches kind of from the beginning, and especially with Josh and Z having them be my coaches for so long. When I come back to Ann Arbor, I still try to get in touch with them. And I think I saw them most of the past summers when I've been back, and still have a great relationship. And they're still at PCC coaching, and sounds like they're doing well. And yeah.
That's a really great background for me, just to kind of the club work and who you were swimming with throughout that young time. Was there a moment for you beyond that 25-yard race with your brother where, one, you start to identify with that grinder mentality, where maybe you're starting to identify that some of your best races might be hard races, and that you're just kind of, as you started to create that willingness to be good at 200 backstrokes, or to have the diversity to be able to be a 200 IM or a 400 IM, or as you created that kind of swimming personality, is there anything that kind of comes to mind that was a breakthrough for you in that understanding of who you were as a swimmer?
Yeah. Let's see. I think as far as kind of transitioning into, those bigger events like the 200 IM, I remember, I think when I was 10 at that state meet, that short course state meet, I was trying to win the high point that year. And I think the 200 IM might have been like the last race of the meet. And I knew that if I won that race, then I would have won high point. And so I was, pretty excited going to that race. And at that point, I think I swam like 3 or 4 50s at that meet too. So it was definitely one of my longer races. And I don't really remember how much time I dropped or what my time was, but I remember, I ending up swimming a lot better than I thought I would, and came out with a win. And that, I mean, that was a ton of fun, and kind of, you know, seeing, especially with those longer events, you see the time drops a lot more. Like, just like the magnitude of time drops is a lot more. And so it was, you know, kind of fun for me. I was like, I kind of like this 200 IM. And also, one thing about Z and Josh and Dan too, they really tried to make us all IM swimmers. So they didn't really, you know, when you're 9, 10, 11, even 12 years old, you don't necessarily like have a specialty yet. So they just try to help make us all just all around swimmers. And I think that really helped me kind of later in my swimming career, especially with the IMs, being able to develop all 4 strokes. And so yeah, that was kind of the first time I was like, I really like, you know, the 200 IM. And then when I started swimming the 400 IM, I was like, you know, I really like the 400 IM too, because, you know, Josh and Z had set me up really well to do the 400 IM. And then kind of carried that on into high school. And even though it's not a high school event, Shannon Dunworth, my coach at Catholic Central, we focused a lot on the 200 back and 400 IM throughout the high school season as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think kind of just laying that foundation from an early point, and then seeing success in those races as I got older and kind of upped, the events got longer and everything. I think that's kind of where I guess I got that from.
Because you're painting a picture as a kid that as a 9, 10-year-old, you're competing at the very highest level, you know, that the state has. You're trying to win the High Point Trophy and win events, and like those are your goals. I also want to ask you about your awareness beyond that sphere. You know, some of the swimmers I've talked to have talked about national camps, or even simply just being aware of, you know, NAG top 16s and top 100 lists, and where they were fitting more broadly beyond just what they were doing in their own state. So I guess I would ask you, like, when were you kind of exposed nationally to what was going on, and when did you start competing nationally?
Yeah. So at the end of my freshman year in high school, I remember getting my first NCSA cuts at that state meet, and then NCSAs were a couple weeks after that. And I'd kind of barely gotten my cut, so I was just lucky enough to go down to Florida, and I think the 400 IM and 200 backstroke were my only cuts at that point. But that was kind of the first like national meet I had ever been to. I'd been to a couple sectional meets in zone meets, racing against other swimmers in the Midwest. But that national stage kind of really opened my mind to see, you know, how fast these guys around the country are going. But I mean, then again, being from Michigan and seeing guys like David Boland and Josh Ehrman and Nick Arkelian and so many of those other swimmers just, you know, a year or two above me, they were always, you know, some of the best in the country as well. So I was fortunate enough to, you know, kind of set my sights on what they were doing, and always try to chase them. But yeah, I mean, that first NCSA experience, I mean, there's so many kids there. I thought I was, you know, it was pretty special for me to get those cuts. And then I go to the meet, and there, you know, hundreds of kids, you know, my age who making it back to finals and all this stuff. And so that kind of put things in perspective. I was like, I have a long way to go before I kind of want to be where I want to be. But that was a really great experience for me, I think, to kind of motivate me throughout my last 3 years in high school.
For sure, for sure. I mean, were you able to, like, how did you put that motivation to work? Did that directly go into your training, or was there also kind of a light bulb that's going off, you know, like, are you changing your way of thinking as well, and from that experience, and kind of having a fuller understanding of where you fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more just kind of changing the way I'm thinking, and changing expectations too. I think, going down there, my high school coach was also down there. I had swam for PCC at that point, so Josh and Z were down there coaching me, but Shannon had also brought a couple swimmers down there too. So kind of everyone I was working with at that point, we were all kind of there together. And like from that point, instead of just trying to drop time every year and stuff, really set expectations, like what's the next level from here? Like I made it to NCSAs, what's the next step? And I think after the sophomore year, the goal is to get to summer juniors. And then after that, like kind of being in the bottom of the pack at summer juniors, what's the next step? Well, let's try to make it back to finals and at these national meets. And then, the next step is the college recruiting. And then, so it kind of just builds on top of each other. But I think it was really important for me to just gain exposure to really what's out there and what the best swimmers are doing. And so you can just set expectations that are maybe higher than what I would have said if I didn't, have that exposure and kind of put myself in that position.